Alright, so now I'm going to import the file. It's the same file we took to Mudbox. It's the same OBJ file. So here it is, Sternum 3D coat to mud. Okay, that's the one we brought. Now one way I can test that I have the right file is it should have my map, should have a UV map that matches what we saw. Okay, so there's our UV map, so we know we've got the right file. So the displacement map that we made in Mudbox will only fit this set of UV coordinates. We can't just put it on any file, so I've got to make sure we kept that. Remember, now this is that original 3D code map. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is add a shader. I put the displacement map actually on the shader, so this is awfully big. Let's see if I can close this up a little bit. I'm going to get rid of this thing. I don't need that, and I'll use the attribute editor. That'll give us a little more room. Okay, so I'm going to create a AI standard, and we said in the current version of the lab it actually says AI standard surface. That's that. And when I have that selected, I can go to the attribute editor, and I'm only going to work with 3 of the different attributes for this. The color under diffuse, I'm going to make that basically a bone color. I'm going to go to the specular color. I'm going to bring that up a little bit, and I'm going to, in other words, I'm bringing up the weight, which means how much it shows. And you can see up here the highlight. So if I make that rougher, we almost lose it. If I make it smaller, it gets very bright. So I'm going to leave it just about, just a little soft, and we might play with that. And then the last thing I'm going to play with is, or adjust, is this subsurface scattering. I'm actually going to make that like a blood red, not real bright, but about that color. Because what I find is when you're trying to create a living thing, having a very subtle hint of red for the blood that's in the tissue tends to make it look more lifelike. So now I can take that, and before I do that, let's do what we'll do. We'll close that, and we'll name this bone. Not bond, bone. And I can right mouse on my model and say assign existing material, bone. Oops, don't have it selected. Okay. And now if I hit 3, and let's adjust our render settings. So since this is a tall, I'm going to make it 800. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to make it 400 units wide and 800 units tall. It's really just arbitrary, but just so I have a tall, thin element. And I'll put on my my resolution gate so you can see that. Make my window a little smaller so I get a better idea of where my boundaries are. There we go. And now one last thing I need to do is create the lights so I can see what this thing looks like. So I'm going to use the light editor. I'll create a sky dome light, and I'll make 2 directional lights. I'll use this directional light, go back to my window here, and say look through selected, panel, look through selected. So my light's selected, so what I'm seeing there, and on this one, perspective window, I'm going to say use all lights. Right now there's so much light on this thing, it looks like a Christmas tree. It's all bright up. So I'm going to, this is now that directional light. It's going to end up being my fill light. I'm sorry, my key light. So I'm going to get it in a position where it's coming from the upper left hand side onto the sternum. And I'll take the sky dome light and number one, you can see how pixelated the sky dome light is. So let's just raise the samples right away. And let's take down its intensity and let's give it a color, like maybe a pale blue, not quite that blue. Okay. All right, and then we'll go on my directional light, and I'll call this my key light so I remember. We'll up its intensity and change its color, make it just a little warm. Okay. And then we'll go to the other directional light, change its color, and I'm going to make it a violet. And while I have it selected, I'll go again to the panel and look for look through selected. Because it's 000, right? I'm getting hit there. So I'm going to move it behind. And I'm going to use all lights here so I can see if I'm getting it. And crank up its intensity. Needs to be a little darker, but a little more saturation. So I'm cranking up the intensity just so I can see it. And now I'll take that down. And let's see what this looks like rendered. Okay, so it looks like a bar of soap that's been carved into the shape of a sternum. Very nice. Not seeing a lot of that violet light on it. Maybe we should up the intensity a little more. Make it down a little darker. Sorry, you can't see that, can you? Okay. So that little green thing represents the light, and you can see what it's doing there. Let's take the sky dome light out of the picture for a second. Okay, that's what I thought. The sky dome light, there we go, it's just adding just a little too much. Okay. Now let's turn this a little bit. See if it now looks like a bar of soap with a little purple light on it. Okay, that's not bad. We can continue to play with that as we want. But now we've got everything set up. So I'm going to stop the tape and then we're going to go to the next phase for this.